So this next class we have, where we are doing the self-assessment we have a self-grading rubric. It's a short class, right? All we do is we explain the rules and have them play. And for the most part, we only have them play the first 12 moves, and then they move on. They start again. So they're only practicing the opening portion and nothing else. So in the opening portion, we have something that says control the center. D4, D5, E4, E5 are the four center squares, and you want to control the center. Every time they make a move that controls the D4, D5, E4, E5 squares, they get a point. But every time they don't, they lose a point. For example, I have a pawn up there, I have something here, and I'm going to move this 2 spaces, right? So everybody has something like a rubric that looks like this. This is their grading. This is their grading sheet, right? Vertically down there are the games. So when I'm playing a game with my partner, then I have moves, I have scores that I give. How many points would I give him for the first move? If he makes a bad move, he loses points because he's not controlling the center, he's not developing a piece, he's not protecting his king, so he loses points. And so I mark their points up against their first game. When I'm done with one game, we move on to the next game and then to the next game, and that's how we finish up this whole sheet. Right? If you have made any learnings, we have some note space there. Some very frequent common mistakes that they make. We want to make sure that this space gets filled out. If somebody is making a mistake because they're making the same mistake over and over again, we have to make sure that they reinforce their learnings here. So the kid who has the most learnings typically gets an extra token, because we want to make sure that they can acknowledge that they have those mistakes that they're trying to improve on. And acknowledgement is the first step, right? So we want to acknowledge that those are the mistakes, and that's how we start. So we reinforce that by giving them tokens for that. So sometimes the classes may not know what controlling the center is, what developing your pieces is, what protecting your king is. You probably have notes in your binders for that. But we want to also, so this is also a summary of them all on the first page. We also want to go over what it means. So in controlling the center, any piece you move has to either attack or occupy the center. So for example, if I had a knight over there, and I'm trying to move my knight, I cannot move my knight there. I'm neither occupying nor controlling the center. But on the other hand, from there, if I go there, I'm now attacking those 2 squares. See, 2 steps in one turn, 2 steps in one turn. So this is a better move than this. In fact, you would lose points if you made that move, because and this is where we talk about the running race example again. Let's say we're in a race, and the referee says, on your mark, get set, go, and I see that my shoelace was untied. All the kids are already halfway through, and I'm here tying up my shoelace. Is that a good example of me? Will I win the race if I'm tying up my shoelace now? No, right? Because when you're developing your game, you want to go make useful steps from the very beginning. You can't take your time off, do something else on the side, and then come back and join the race. You'd have a severe disadvantage that way. So the knight going to a corner there and not controlling the center is a bad choice. So you would lose points for that. You always want to go into the center squares, and if you had a pawn and you want to move your pawn, right? Let's put these squares back. You want to move your pawn. You could have moved. Let's figure it out. You could have moved this pawn there 2 spaces, or you could have moved that pawn there 2 spaces, right? And this pawn gets you points. That pawn makes you lose points, because we're moving that, and this is only in the opening, by the way. In the first 12 moves, you cannot afford to make any of those moves which are not controlling the center. Any move you make has to control the center in the first 12 moves. And in this case, if you see, the pawn is doing 2 things. It's occupying the center square, and it's attacking another center square. There are 2 ways of controlling. You occupy or you attack, and or you attack, right? The second rule you have is to develop your pieces. And we have a quick short note here about that, but the definition of develop is to make your pieces cross this pawn wall. By the way, a pawn is not considered a piece. A pawn is just a pawn is just a pawn. A piece in chess is defined as these in the back. The major ones, which can actually cause some significant damage, go back and forth and all. Right? So there are two royal pieces, the king and the queen. There are three major pieces, the king, queen, and the rook. And there are two minor pieces, the knight and the bishop. That's how the pieces are all laid out. And you should know this. There are two royal pieces, the king and the queen. There are three major pieces, the king, queen, and the rook. And there are two minor pieces, the knight and the bishop. The knight and the bishop are called your minor pieces. The pawns don't even count as pieces, right? They're just coins on the chessboard, right? So when you have to move your pawn, you want to move the pawn into the center and not there. An acceptable move is where you flank from the outside, so you move it 2 spaces and you're attacking from the outside. That's an acceptable move as well. In fact, there are some chess openings which flank from the outside, right? So to develop your pieces, you have to cross the pawn wall. So if the knight goes there, he has not actually crossed it. So in our definition, even though it's attacking the center, we say that the knight has to cross the pawn wall to be called developed. There's this other rule too. Like, let's say you're in a running race and you decide to race with just 1 foot, right? I mean, everybody else is running with both their feet, and here you are running with 1 foot. What do you call running with 1 foot? You're basically hopping, right? Who would win the game? You who is hopping, you who are hopping, or the other one who is running with both feet? The runner wins, not the hopper, right? So to translate that to this, if you have moved one piece, you have developed the knight, right? If you're not moving another piece and you continue to play with just one piece, dancing all over the board, what you would see is that you're essentially hopping with 1 foot. The other pieces have not developed at all, right? So you would lose a point if you develop the same piece more than once in the first 12 moves. In the first 12 moves, if all the pieces are developed, that's a different story. But if you move a piece more than once, when there is another piece to be developed, you lose a point. So at the end of the day, we're trying to enforce good behavior with points, because we think points work good. They work best with kids, because kids don't really need dollars yet. They're okay with points, right? So points work best with kids. So we give them points for all such things. When a bad development is where you develop the same piece more than once. Sometimes we see a case where, and I'm looking for a bishop. There's a bishop over here. What they do is they go all the way there, so far out. And what does the other kid do? They push their pawn forward. And now this guy is scared, right? And he goes all the way back, wherever he was. So what he has just done, he has undeveloped a developed piece, completely undeveloped, and you lose points for that. If you've come all the way here and you're being attacked, stop somewhere where you're still in front of the pawn wall. Don't undevelop a developed piece, and if you do, you will lose points. Right? The last thing is, don't get the queen out too early, because what do we see if the queen is out too early? He gets attacked the most, and so you shouldn't get your queen out too early. So let's say that I have my queen over there, and I get him out all the way out here. Right. Let's say we have other pieces too. So I brought my queen all the way out here. What would the blacks do? They would develop their pieces and attack my queen. I can't develop anything else because my queen is dying here. So what do I have to do? I have to save it. I just wasted a move. Right? But getting the queen out really early, you're just wasting your moves. So you would lose points if you develop your queen very early before you develop the other pieces. There is only one way to develop your rook. And that is, you want to castle early and connect the rooks. So in the good old days, castling was not even required. But now we make it a rule that they have to castle and they have to connect the rooks.
What do you mean by connect the rooks?
Connect the rooks is where, so let me castle first. Yes, exactly. So I'm going to castle. The rooks are still not connected. There's a queen in the middle. I get the queen out, and now the rooks are connected. Connected rooks are very powerful. So the question usually that gets asked is a queen very powerful, or are two rooks really powerful? Because two rooks are 10 points, and a queen is only 9 points. And so this is beyond the scope of this. But is one queen powerful, or are two rooks powerful? And the answer is it depends. It depends on the rooks. If the rooks are connected, they're more powerful. And if they're not, two rooks cannot beat a queen. Because a queen can fork, queen can pen, it can do all kinds of good stuff, and the rooks would stand no chance. Right? It's like if you can connect them, it's like having just one bee. One bee comes at you, you can swat it easily. And there's a whole hive of bees coming at you, you have to run, right? So if the rooks are connected, then they become stronger, and they're worth truly the 10 points that you have assigned them. So you want to connect the rooks from the beginning itself. So you castle and get everything out, and you connect the rooks. Let's say there's a free or hanging piece. It has no support. Is it okay for you to capture it in the first 12 moves? By all means, yes. We're not going to put us up in a hole where we say you can't even capture a piece, because capturing pieces gets you the game, right? So if you see a hanging piece or a free piece, it's okay to deviate a little and capture that piece. And for capturing the piece, you do get some points. For deviating, you lose points, but for capturing, you get more points. So that balances out, right? So we have rules that say if you castle in under 12 moves, you get a +1 point, right? So I'm just reading the rules right now. If you castle in, and by the way, in one move, you can get more than 1 point. It depends on how many of these +1s you get in that move, right? Let's say you castled and you also connected the rooks in the same move. For connecting the rooks, it is a good rook development. For developing the rooks properly, you get +1. For castling, you get +1. So you actually get 2 points. You keep your secret service pawns, and we talk about Donald Trump all the time here, right? We say that all the pawns are born equal. When the game starts, all the pawns are born equal, right? And but when you castle, and you go to a corner here, these 3 pawns are what we now call the secret service pawns. And this is where I see, schools are more left than what you would like or not. And you'd say that when you say Donald Trump, they're like, ew, right? And we remind them, this is a good time to remind them. So I do remind them, I don't care if I'm right or left, but I have to remind them that he's still the president. Right? You may have not voted for him, but he's still your president. And this is where I bring it up and say, this is a good time. Don't let your right versus left come in there, but I do say that these are your secret service pawns.
Can we make it a secret service for somebody else, like bodyguards?
No.
Or
In the other cases, the pawns can move wherever they like. But when you've castled the king to a corner, these 3 pawns become your secret service pawns. When Donald Trump goes to North Korea to meet that country president there, before he goes into that country, North Korea doesn't like the US at all. But before he goes there, the Secret Service goes before him, make sure that he's going on streets that are well guarded, and make sure he comes back alive. You want your king to come back alive. You want your king to stay alive. And that's where these Secret Service pawns are very important, right? Watch out for your right versus left leaning, but tell them about the Secret Service, because the kids get a kick out of the Secret Service.
Everybody loves Obama.
I know, right? Let's
My face should say it more.
I agree on that.
Alright, so you want to control this. You want to control the center or develop past the pawn barrier. Every time you control the center or develop past the pawn barrier, you get a point. Right? So if you're on the pawn wall, you don't get any points. But the moment you cross him, you get a point. In fact, there are negatives too. If you missed capturing a free piece, if the opponent says, "Look, I have a free piece that you didn't capture," then you lose a point. Yes.
Well, for this, would you then partner up the older kids with the younger kids? Because, like, I have a kindergartner, and this I feel like is going to go, woo.
You should. But then talk to the older kid, because the older kid should not beat up the younger kid.
Right. But
Make sure
because
that
I'm
he's
just thinking, I have a few of the young ones that
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
doing this
What
might
I
be
would
a
do
little bit
is,
too much.
I'd build some responsibility on those older kids,
Mhm.
and I would say, if the younger kid has less points than you, then you've not done a good job. You've only done a good job if the younger one has at least the same or more points than you, and then you are a teacher's assistant, a teacher's helper. But if on the other hand, you look at the sheet and say, "Look, you have more points than the younger one," because if I have two daughters, right? I give my older daughter the chance to coach my younger one and give the point score on that, and I teach the point score. I can bet you the older one would have 1,000 points, the younger would have 0, because you'd beat her up big time, right? So we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that the older kid is in a teaching position to teach the younger kid. So that's a really great thing.
Okay.
The only thing is just watch out for that, where the older kid should not feel that it's a free for all. It's his time for the day. He's been beaten up the whole day, so now it's his time to get back. He shouldn't have that. Right?
Okay.
We take off a point for incorrect development. Incorrect development is when you're at the edges of the board, you're not controlling the center, all of those. You lose a point for incorrect development if you develop one piece more than once in the first 12 moves. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. You can just read it too. And it's incorrect development. There are some kids who do this, right? They move this 2 spaces. 2 spaces. 2 spaces. Every single piece. And in fact, they both do the same thing. I see this happen on both the sides too. It's funny. This is very, and you are in some schools you still have beginners too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you would say is they move it 2 spaces. This guy moves it 2 spaces. And he'd move the 2 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of capturing, what would he do?
Move 2
Move
Like
2 spaces.
2 spaces, and pretty soon you have 2 spaces all the way through. That's not allowed. It's incorrect development if you move more than 2. If you poke more than 2 holes through the pawn wall. This is where we talk about something called a doggy door. Right? So let's say that you have all kinds of pawns here, everywhere else. The only way you can develop your bishop is if you open a doggy door. You open a doggy door and you let the dog out. Right? So you have 2 bishops, which means you can open 2 doggy doors. That's all. You don't have to move more than 2 pawns up into the front. And the only reason you have to move those 2 pawns too is to let the dogs out. That's all. 1 for the black bishop, 1 for the white bishop.
One of the openings we teach, the only opening we teach would render you negative points with the king and you don't develop.
Yes.
So
Yes. So those openings are that's a different story. So
Yeah.
in the openings you don't develop all the pieces. Well, for the first 4 moves,
fianchetto gets you negative points.
fianchetto gets you a point too. Actually, it does get you points for the first 4 moves, and then on the other side, when you're developing the other, for example, you're castling really early, you get a point. You're developing your knight out, you're getting a point.
Right.
You're fianchettoing your bishop, you're opening 1 pawn, not controlling the center, so you lose a point for that. You're right.
It's a 0. You render 0 out of the king Indian opening because you only get points on 2 of the moves, and you get negative points on 2 of the moves.
You're castling early, so you get a point. You get your knight out there, so you're getting a point. But for the bishop, you're not crossing the pawn wall. You're right,
And then
and so you don't get a point.
and the pawn, you're not controlling the center.
And so you don't get a point.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yes. If anybody says that, then it's just a way of opening.
Putting it out there before they even say it.
Yeah. So it's just a way. So what
Yeah.
you're learning is good practice in general.
Yeah.
But in exceptions, then there are exceptions.
Kids are very good at calling you out on things.
Yep. So that's what we have for the rubric. We give a rubric and then this.